Russia's aggressive policies have created a full-blown crisis in Eastern Europe. The Baltic and Scandinavian countries have also been forced to take strategic precautionary steps against Russia. Finland is one of the countries that feels Russia's threat most keenly. Finland shares a 1,340-kilometer border with Russia. This is perhaps one of the most difficult situations for Finland. Imagine that your neighbor, with whom you share a 1,340 kilometers border, is an aggressive power threatening all of Europe and the West. How difficult it is. Finland's 1,340-kilometer-long border with Russia has historically opened the door to many tensions between the two countries. The historical antagonisms and the current situation raise the possibility that Russia could invade Finland. Or so the Finns think, and they may be right, and have every reason to take precautions. But could Russia invade Finland, a neighboring country? The answer would be a big no. Today, Finland's extraordinary preparations for a possible Russian attack are so advanced that they reflect the perception that this country cannot be invaded. In particular, the massive bunker systems built under Helsinki, designed to withstand any kind of attack, including nuclear, greatly increase Finland's chances of survival in the event of war. But why have so many underground bunkers been built? What is their capacity and what laws mandate them? In this video, we will discuss why Finland would be invulnerable in the event of a Russian attack. If you want to support us, you can like the video and subscribe to our channel to help us reach our 1 million goal. Let's dive into the Finnish underworld and discover why this network of bunkers is at the center of the perception of inviolability. One of the striking facts about Finland is that there is almost a secret city under the capital Helsinki. There is a huge network of tunnels, up to 200 kilometers long, dug under Helsinki. These tunnels are not just narrow corridors, they are vast enough to contain soccer fields, ice hockey rinks, giant water reservoirs, power plants, and even swimming pools. This network is not just a simple shelter, but a huge infrastructure that can be used as a sports field or entertainment complex in peacetime. Most importantly, in the event of war or the threat of a nuclear attack, much of this underground space can be converted into a real bunker within 72 hours. Air filtration systems, water and food stockpiles, pressure doors and evacuation areas to combat nuclear fallout. Everything is organized according to the standards set by Finnish law. The Helsinki government claims that these shelters will be able to accommodate not only the city's population, but more. According to some sources, the population of Helsinki is around 650,000. While the shelters under the city have the capacity to accommodate 900,000 to 1 million people. Thus, ordinary civilian life and shelter in case of war seem to be intertwined. Other Scandinavian countries have similar shelter infrastructures, but Finland's is far more advanced. And this is not limited to the capital. According to official government data, there are more than 50,000 shelters across the country. The latest figures suggest that around 70% of Finland's population could fit in these shelters. So what were the reasons for building shelters across the country? The idea of this underground second city was born out of the harsh experiences of World War II and the fears of the Cold War. In order to take precautions against a possible attack, especially from the Soviet Union, Finland made the construction of bunkers a national policy from the 1960s onwards. As a continuation of this policy, every new construction project is obliged to build a shelter with certain standards. Every building above a certain height must have an underground shelter. Thus, the number of shelters has been increasing year by year and has now reached tens of thousands. Naturally, the implementation of this system entails huge costs. That's why the term million-dollar shelters is used. Massive construction work, years of infrastructure projects, the necessity to build bunkers in every building. All of this has a significant impact on Finland's defense spending. But the Finnish people stand behind this investment, believing that this is not a luxury but a vital necessity. If Russia attacks, we will go underground and wait, while the Russians will roam the empty streets, many Finns say in defense of the bunker idea. On the Russian side, it is unclear how much Finland is aware of this extraordinary underground preparation. Historically, however, repeated tensions and wars between the two countries have led the Finns to take measures out of geographical necessity. After Finland gained independence in 1917, Soviet Russia initially recognized it, but soon the Winter War between the Soviet Union and Finland broke out in 1939. The Soviets attacked with a large army, but the Finns, thanks to their natural geography and disciplined troops, inflicted heavy losses on a much stronger army. Still, Unable to resist Soviet pressure, Finland lost 9% of its territory. This experience led Finland to adopt a defense-oriented strategy in the following years. We see this most clearly in the underground bunkers. In the event of a renewed Russian attack, Finland wants to be able to hide its civilian population underground and provide long-term resistance. Finland is also on the agenda with bizarre projects. Helsinki has plans to extend its 200-kilometer underground network across the country. They also want to build a 100-kilometer undersea railway tunnel to Tallinn, the capital of Estonia. If this project is realized, it will be the longest railway tunnel in the world, and the two capitals will be 20 minutes apart. Thus, in case of a possible war, Finland will have an underground connection with the Baltic states. This connection is a strategic move in terms of both logistics and defense. But is the status of being unoccupiable a phenomenon achieved only through underground tunnels? Of course not. In addition to the underground tunnels, Finland's vast forests and lakes also present a challenging geography for the enemy. Finland's nature is also a great advantage. Dense forests, lakes, marshes, and a land famous for its freezing cold winters are all factors that can slow down the Russian army's advance. Natural conditions are a powerful ally on the Finn side. Even today's modern technology cannot fully guarantee to overcome the harsh winter conditions. It is therefore not hard to imagine that if the Russian army were to enter Finland, it would face ice and snow above, huge underground bunkers, and the full support of the West. On paper, Finland looks very long, but in reality, its population and strategic settlements are largely concentrated in the south. This means that the army can concentrate its defences in a narrow area and make extensive use of underground tunnels. On the other hand, Finland's military capacity cannot be underestimated. Although the country has a population of 5.5 million, it is characterized by compulsory military conscription and a large mobilization capacity. Together with the potential in the reserves, 900,000 people can be recruited in a short period of time. In recent years, they have invested heavily in land, air, and naval forces. The Finnish army's artillery force is considered one of the largest in Europe. Finland is the latest Scandinavian country to strengthen its coastal defences, planning to purchase more than a dozen self-propelled artillery systems to protect its territorial waters in the Baltic Sea. According to recently published documents, the purpose of these purchases would be to create a mobile artillery capability dedicated to coastal defence to engage ships in Finnish territorial waters, including archipelagos in coastal areas and enemy forces ashore. According to the European Commission's Marine Spatial Planning Database, Finland's territorial waters cover 54,130 square kilometres. The project to protect this vast area with artillery systems is quite extensive. Finland is also modernising and expanding its air force. In particular, they plan to modernise their air force equipped with F-18S with the new F-35S they will buy. Underwater equipment and Coast Guard ships are also designed to be effective in a difficult geography such as the Baltic Sea. Finland also receives support from the US against the Russian threat. There is a critical defense-related agreement between the US and Finland. The agreement will allow the Americans to use the land to deploy personnel and equipment. In fact, we are literally talking about creating a US military base in Finland. If implemented, this agreement between the US and Finland will give the US Armed Forces the opportunity to use Finnish territory and bases for training and material storage. According to the new agreement, Helsinki will make 15 military bases available to US forces. On the other hand, the war in Ukraine has shown how dangerous drones can be and that Russia has gained considerable experience in using them. In response, the Baltic states, Norway, Finland and Poland are reportedly planning to build a drone wall on the border with Russia. Latvia and Estonia were also among these countries. Finnish Interior Minister Mari Rantanen reported that the plan to create a drone wall will cover 1,340 kilometers of the Russian border and will develop over time. Lithuanian Interior Minister Agne Bilotaite said that each country must fulfill its responsibility and that the drone wall will expand over time. At the time of its announcement, NATO's drone wall was a completely different plan of action against Russia in the Baltics. It was reported that the UAV wall will be built over time on a route through Norway, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and onto Poland. Considering that the IHA wall to be built on the route will be built against the threats posed by Russia and Belarus, it is useful to first emphasize the 167-kilometer borderline of Norway and Russia. In addition, as we mentioned, it is also necessary to calculate Russia's borderlines of 1,340 kilometers with Finland, 294 kilometers with Estonia, and 282 kilometers with Latvia. In conclusion, it is clear that Finland is not as fragile as it appears on the maps, but has many advantages, notably its underground network of shelters and NATO support. If Russia ever ventures across the Finnish border, it will have to deal with ice, winter conditions, and a well-trained army above ground, and a huge underground network of shelters protecting millions of people. Defeating the Finnish army, which has modern systems from air defense to artillery, would be devastating for Russia both economically and militarily. For this reason, most experts agree that Russia simply cannot afford to attack Finland. In short, the answer to the question, why Finland cannot be invaded, lies in the blend of historical experience, geography, technology, bunkers, and social determination. Recent statements by Finland's foreign minister have sent a striking message that Russia will become weaker over time. Accordingly, while the excessive military and economic burden of Moscow's war in Ukraine continues to wear down the Putin regime, the eyes of the world stage are still on how the West will react. In particular, Finland's long border with Russia and historical experience in the region have kept Helsinki alert to the Russian threat. While Finland wants guarantees that it will not be attacked in the same way as Ukraine, it is also questioning whether the rest of Europe has the same awareness. There are signs in Western capitals that the sanctions weakening Russia and the support for Ukraine are here to stay. However, Finland's foreign minister wants to draw attention to the fact that Russia will lose power over time, but the West must act together in this process. Moscow is feeling the cost of the occupation in Ukraine more and more every day, but without full coordination and commitment on the Western Front, Russia may continue to breathe. In particular, factors such as energy trade, military spending, and shifting geopolitical spheres of influence are slowly eroding Russia rather than bringing it down suddenly. Helsinki, for its part, recognizes that this process of erosion is long and uncertain, and that it should never relax. Finland does not want to be under the illusion that what is happening in Ukraine will not affect it because of its geographical distance. With its Soviet past and the experience of the Winter War of the Second World War, it is well aware of how unpredictable Russia can be towards its neighbours. This is why cooperation with the European Union and the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation is no longer an option for Finland, but a necessity. Not surprisingly, joining NATO is part of this strategy. Some in the West may be less concerned about the long-term weakening of the Russian threat, but neighbouring countries like Finland cannot afford to be. The phrase "awake to the Russian threat" reflects precisely this concern. The enormous costs of sanctions and war on the Russian economy are eroding the internal dynamics of the Putin regime. But it remains to be seen how fast and deep this process will go. At this point, Finland says that time is working against Russia, but it does not fully believe in a rapid collapse scenario, as some in the West expect. What is important is that Europe and the Western world in general does not back down from its efforts to isolate Russia and support Ukraine, because there is always the risk of a diplomatic game in which Russia wears down on the front line and tries to win at the table. The weakest link in such a game would be the Western states, which either lose their resolve or make concessions to Russia because of their own internal political difficulties. This is precisely why the Helsinki leadership is asking aloud: does all of Europe have the same level of consciousness? Countries within the European Union that are currently dependent on Russian energy to varying degrees may be inclined to open a soft door to Russia, citing economic concerns. Finland, however, says this would be a historic mistake. If Russia achieves even a partial success in its occupation of Ukraine, or at least maintains the status quo, it may not hesitate to make new moves in the future that could irritate many bordering countries from the Baltic to the Black Sea. This is why Finland has repeatedly called for the West to isolate Russia globally with unity and resolve, and to continue military and financial support to Ukraine. One of the most frightening scenarios for Finland is the possibility that some European states might experience Ukraine fatigue. Finland is worried that many governments might say to the public, "The war is going on too long, energy prices have risen, our economy is shrinking, let's make peace as soon as possible," and reduce their support packages for Ukraine. For Helsinki, there is a strategic risk that countries in its neighbourhood might offer Russia some kind of interim deal or seek secret diplomatic rapprochement with Moscow. Such a relaxation could give Russia a breathing space and open the door to greater tensions in the long run. This is where Finland raises the question: is the West really awake? If the belief that Russia will wear out over time is not coupled with proper planning and a patient strategy, Moscow may eventually find the opportunity to regroup. This is the Finnish foreign minister's message. Russia will be weakened sooner or later, but if the West does not do everything it can in the meantime, the threat from Russia will not disappear. This poses risks not only for Ukraine, but also for neighbouring countries and European security as a whole. That is why Helsinki continues to increase its military spending, strengthen its borders within NATO, and advocate a tougher Russia policy within the European Union. In short, Finland is emphasising the erosion of Russia's power and telling its allies in the West to wake up, don't relax. The search for peace in some European countries is a ground that Moscow is eyeing to see what it can get out of it. If the war in Ukraine continues as a long war of attrition and the West remains resolute, Russia will be even more cornered. But if the unity breaks down and the rosy picture is painted as Russia is no longer a threat anyway, the Kremlin is already ready to exploit the vacuum. As a country that shares the same geography with Russia, Finland speaks from historical experience and sends a kind of warning to the West. The Putin regime may be weakening, but the clock is ticking against Russia, and the West must remain resolute. Amidst all these concerns, the Ukraine war continues, and the future of European security is shaped by the shadow of the unknown.